Hi, folks. Welcome to your first lecture in your course on gender. Most of our lectures like this are going to be based on the book, The Gendered Society, which is the assigned book for this course. This particular lecture is an introduction. We're going to be looking at human beings and how human beings are an engendered species. We're going to look at many things like nature versus nurture, sex versus gender, things like that. We'll lay a basic overview of where the course is going to go, and then the ensuing lectures will dig a little further. First, we've got to deal with the basics, of course. Sex, when we talk about sex, we're talking about biology. That means we're talking about chromosomes and hormones and genitalia. Men have penises, women have vaginas. This is a basic difference between men and women from a physical, biological perspective. We call this, we make reference to this as our sex. It's assigned at birth by a doctor, largely based on the appearance of your genitalia alone. When we talk about this, we're typically talking about males and females. Now, of course, later on in the course, we'll get into intersex, we'll get into transgender and non-binary individuals as well. So there is even some difference within the sex category. Gender, on the other hand, is a byproduct of culture. When we think about culture and when we think about gender, it's learned behavior. How do we know it? We learned it. We made it up. And if we made it up, well, we could make something else up as well. When we're talking about gender, what we're actually getting at is the attitudes, meanings, beliefs, and behaviors associated with what it means to be male or female. So once you assign a certain sex to an individual, then what does it actually mean to be affiliated with that particular sex? This is, of course, learned through the process of socialization. Socialization starts in our lives very early on. I always like to think of what color is designed, or what color is associated with little boys. Well, of course, that's blue. And what color is associated with little girls? Well, that's pink. So we start to differentiate between males and females very early on. And as we go through life, we're socialized, whether it's through our parents, our teachers, our friends, our priests, the media. That's where we learn what it means to be male and female. And then what we're talking about here is really what it means to be masculine when you're male and feminine when you're female. The authors in this textbook talk about the interplanetary theory of gender. And this really brings us into the debate of gender difference versus gender dominance. When we're talking about gender difference, we're making the statement that there is an inherent difference between men and women. And that is not associated with the concept of gender dominance. When we're talking about gender dominance, we're talking about something deeper than just a simple classification system. What we're really talking about is concepts like inequality, hierarchy, and power dynamics, and how they favor one gender over another. This little cartoon here is a perfect example. The man on the left, he's out singing his heart out, possibly doing karaoke, and we describe him as so successful and a strong leader, and he presents himself so well, versus the woman on the other side, when we describe her, we say things like, what an ambitious diva she is, control freak, such a flirt, a flake, and dare I say, a feminist. So both of them are engaging in the same type of action, but one of them is constructed as being good, the other one is constructed as being bad. When we get into the interplanetary theory of gender, what we really need to start asking ourselves is, why does virtually every society on Earth differentiate people based on gender? And then, why is virtually every one of those societies based on men's dominance? Is this solely related to our differences in genitalia, or is there something else going on? And as we dig into gender, we'll really start to think, or at least I hope we start to think, that there's something else going on here. When we talk about interplanetary theories of gender, we're dealing with the nature versus nurture debate. And in this debate, there are essentially two camps. First, the biological determinists, which represent the nature side of things. They're saying that we're hardwired from birth to be different. Our sex makes us naturally different, and the male sex is naturally more dominant, capable, and worthy, whereas the female sex is weak, fragile, and subordinate. The differential socialization theory, which represents the nurture side of things, takes a different tack. It's saying that we are taught to be different. Society and culture teach us that femininity is bad and masculinity is good. It's the masculine gender that is valued, thus making all those male and masculine dominant, capable, and worthy. If we accept the idea of differential socialization, then we're accepting that the differences that we attribute to male and female, or masculine and feminine, are essentially made up by those in power in society. And then they construct a reality based on what they want society to be defined by. And in this case, it's that men are good and women are bad. But if we made it up that way, it also means that we can change the way that we make it up as well. This book and, of course, this class are going to argue that there are more differences among men and women than between men and women. This is something that we also come into, this is a concept that we also come into contact when we talk about race. We realize that there are more differences within the races as there are between the races. And gender follows suit here. There are more differences within the category of men and category of women than there are between the categories of men and women. And of course, gender difference is the outcome of gender inequality. Rather than thinking that our differences imply these natural or inevitable inequalities, we must recognize that inequality is legitimated through the mere notion of difference. As we dig into this idea of interplanetary theories of gender, we begin to break down gender inequality. And as we break down the foundation to gender differences as well. And what remains will likely be a world in which other differences, things like race, age, class, sexuality, and ability, are more accented. So it's not simple. It's not as simple as gender being the cause of the difference. As we dig into inequality, power, and hierarchy, we're going to find that these other categories are important as well.